All right. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam, gaming, and Gunpla. I am your host, Steven, aka Midnight Hatter. And joining me, as always, the Blue Gamer, Gundam Explainer, Adam Blue. How are you, my friend?
Doing good, doing good. It's been a busy, crazy week. Some cool news came out, but like I
Yeah.
always love this moment. Again, I always say this where it's the middle of the week, decompress a little, and talk some Gundam hobby, what have you, video games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good hump day break, and especially this week. Like you said, we've got a couple of big announcements that came out in the Gundam world. You dropped a video earlier. You actually dropped two videos today, which is a
Yeah.
special Gundam Explained.
Yeah.
So we got two Gundam Explained videos. The first on the G-Quacks, mobile suits that are coming out in high grade form,
Yeah.
and then we got some surprise news today about the production of the live action Gundam movie,
Finally.
which, you know, I don't know that we know too much more than we did previously, because you had already announced earlier in the year that Jim Mc or was that
Yeah,
last
Jim
year?
Mickle.
What
Yeah, it was late last year. Yeah, I forget. The time is flying. Like since that announcement too. Like, yeah, and you're right. There was only well, I guess two pieces of new information. Did you want to get into that now or still do intro?
Oh, yeah, why not? I mean,
Okay.
hey, it's,
No, yeah, so no, the two new pieces of information is that there's going to be a Bandai Namco Filmworks America. So it's a whole new company. That's good news, to hear something like that that's going on. I was like, okay, that's kind of like something there intangible when it comes
Mhm,
to the North American arm of, live action Bandai properties. The other part was that they begin production April 1st, which that's crazy because that's soon. That's really
it's
soon.
very soon. That's before my daughter's born, so,
Oh, wow. This marks,
um So
well,
yeah,
then
they're trying to get this movie out before I have 2 kids. No,
oh,
no, and it's April Fool's Day of all days, right?
yeah,
So, like,
and I
and
didn't
I don't
believe it.
know if April Fool's Day is as big a thing in the East as it is over here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kind of an interesting thing to think about, but I do wanna go back to what you were saying is so that there is going to be a Bandai Namco Filmworks of America,
Yeah.
similar to Bandai Namco Entertainment America. What's interesting about that news in particular is that we've seen examples of Japanese companies doing that so far in, like, Nintendo being a part of the Mario movie that Illumination put out, and
Mhm.
Sega being deeply involved with original film that did the Sonic movies. So
Yeah.
what you are seeing is a trend of these companies are no longer just licensing out their properties to be made into, live action films. They are actually taking an active interest in the production and overseeing what the final product is put out. And I think we can all agree that especially when you look at the final product of like the Mario movie and the Sonic trilogy, is it technically a quadrilogy yet, or is that a
Oh,
spoiler?
yeah. Hey, they announced it, so
Hey, so we know that it's coming. What I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, those were wildly successful movies to the point that, like, now they're talking about a Legend of Zelda movie,
yeah.
and we've got another Sonic movie on the way. So it's like, clearly, when companies take a vested interest in their own IPs instead of just kind of licensing them out to the highest bidder, you end up with, undeniably a better product, right?
Yeah, and it's like you have to at some level, some degree know the material.
Right.
Because I do think it's crazy through my life when I would see things made into live action, how it was like nothing like the cartoon, nothing like the Mario movie, the first Mario movie being the biggest example.
Yeah.
And it's like,
As much as I
where
love Bob Hoskins.
yeah, yeah, that great choice though. But like where in what and how? Why? Does it ever get to a point when making something live action that they're like take so many liberties to where it's like, okay, this isn't even what whether it's a video game also or a comic book or cartoon made into live action. There's even like the X-Men movies.
The X-Men
Like
movies.
I
Yeah,
like them, but there's liberties. It's like, why?
right.
There's already a neat story that could have been told. There's already a neat design that can just be the reason something's drawn in a comic is because it's hard to do that for real. So how can you then show that for real? And
Right.
you're right. Lately, these companies are figuring out even Barbie,
Yeah.
they were being very careful with that IP to make it translate, and it's like, how do you make that translate? And they figured something out. Sometimes it's a commentary about itself in a way.
Yeah, yeah, I think so, and, yeah, I was gonna say another great example of kind of, it was a successful, well, cult successful film, but like Starship Troopers, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
started off as a book, and the interpretation of it in live action
Mm.
was, a satirical take on what the book is about, right? Uh, but, like, obviously, the movie was still entertaining, but it was very insulting to the original source material, which, like, the X-Men movies, they took liberties, but they weren't directly trying to, like, dog the source material. I almost feel
Yeah.
like nowadays, when you look at the Deadpool movie, especially, like, Deadpool and Wolverine, they are actively dogging their own material, which is kind of an
Yeah,
interesting take.
well, I mean, don't let me I c I could get on a Ryan Reynolds tangent now that that new information has come out. We could talk about that later. But I wanna
Yeah,
go
for
back to
sure.
something. But Starship Troopers, I don't think Paul Verhoeven was trying to dog on the book as much as I unless I'm wrong, as much as he was, like, using his style to tell the story, because even with RoboCop, you know how it's kind of like a satirical take on news and consumerism.
Yeah.
I think it was more of, "Hey, let's make this in a movie." It's like, well, how do you make this into a movie? And so I think that's why it worked, because even if there's a lot of things in Starship Troopers, the movie, that wasn't in the book and vice
Mhm.
versa, the essence was there. And that's kinda like the world building that they're in, And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I read the book when I was, younger when the movie came out, and I found it to be very boring even though it was interesting, because it was kind of like a world building book too. It was just, here's the world the characters are in.
Exactly, and yeah, I guess what's interesting about it is even in Paul Verhoeven's take on Starship Troopers, the essence of the original bled through, and I think that that's one of the things that, typically gets overlooked in satire is, so often I think we've talked about this before on the show, is, like, so often satire fails because the essence of the thing that you're trying to satire
Yeah.
ends up coming across too strongly, and you end up kind of propagandizing yourself,
Yeah, and
which
that's where sometimes a sequel inadvertently, or like a second season or third season of a TV show inadvertently just seems to just be slop,
yeah.
because it's really trying to, "Okay, well, what was it that worked?" And sometimes it's just looking at the surface level and not, underneath. Yeah.
I feel like that's where we're at with The Boys.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that that's, I think season 5 is getting ready to come out here soon, and I think that, yeah, I mean, what made the 1st and is it like the 1st and 3rd season of The Boys so special is that they really leaned heavily into the theme of what was going on and, for the most part, stayed pretty true to the comic books. Although I have to say, their decision to retcon what Soldier Boy's story was actually a very inspired one, and sometimes you see that. Like, personally, I thought that the movie version of Watchmen was better than the comic
Mm.
book, at least in terms of the actual story being told and, like, the twist at the end. Um, I think it made more sense than like, "Oh, we're gonna get artists together and make this alien that's an imaginary alien." It's like, you wouldn't even have to do that, just use like, you have a walking nuclear bomb,
Oh,
just point at him and
that's
say
a
that he's the
good
problem, you know what I mean?
that's a good example of where that's been brought up before, but the way you kind of helped spell it out there, I think that's a good point, 'cause sometimes movies will make changes to source material and it works. Um,
Exactly.
that's
And
funny.
that is a perfect segue to the theme of tonight's show, which is changes.
Oh,
You guys probably did notice that I saw that in the chat. Ultronymous, good to see you. Dan Vince, Zionic Shadow, Dio. Uh, I, who else am I seeing in here? Nintendo Gal. I think I saw Robert in here earlier as well. Got all the usual crew. Yeah, you guys are probably
awesome.
noticing the stream running a little bit smoother. We do have a new setup here, almost completely operational. I feel like the Death Star in the end of Return of the Jedi. I do have, the new stream setup is coming together, new desk here in front of me. I've got a desk over here that's got the 3D print station and everything.
Ooh,
You probably see that this beautiful mic stand is now actually mounted to my rolling chair so that no matter
brilliant.
where I go in the room, you've got perfect sound.
Love it.
But I do have a bare wall behind me, so that needs to be fixed.
A
So we
bear
are gonna
wall?
get well,
That would be
you
awesome.
have the right to bare wall. Let me tell you, that's so, yeah, we've got a lot of changes, here in the mix, and I'm excited about them because I think that it's gonna, obviously open me up to creating more content, getting more of these projects done. Please let 2025 be the year of, no incomplete projects.
Oh, man, t tell me about it. I'm glad you said that because I have a few I think it's like I really need to focus. But speaking of projects and stuff you're planning and the bear wall again, have you already mapped out, like, how you're gonna put stuff on that back wall?
Yeah, I think so. So the idea is I have, 2 shelves that are just kind of like, actually, let me show them off. Yikes. These little guys, they're just floating shelves, like, wooden guys
Oh, yeah,
here.
yeah.
Um, so these guys are gonna be mounted up, here and here, kind of in line with the shelf on the sidewall here, and then, of course, we would not be complete without oh gosh, let's see if I can pick it up without breaking it.
Nope.
Nope, didn't happen. The Argama flight deck here,
Ah,
um,
jealous.
and I actually installed another, panel in the middle of it, so it's the full length Argama flight deck. I might just do the
Wow.
rest of the show like this. This is kind of fun.
I think you should, in the spirit of Zeta.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. No, I like that needs to be a picture. You need to have your wife take a picture of you smiling through that hangar door.
Yeah.
But you know what? I wanna because we were talking before the stream, like, on your left, the way you have that set up looks so good.
Dude,
And
I love this. It creates this depth. You probably can't see it on stream just because of the way that the, crop is, but yeah, this, obviously, my lit shelf that I built is the model kits need to be fixed. They've been kind of jostled around, but they're there, and you might even see I've got, my Zeonic Shadow representation and RVA Gunpla representation on there, so
yeah, well, then I wonder because it looks I don't know if you planned out the height or did it just happen to work out that way?
no, it was accidental, 100%.
Okay, because that made me think then because I had this issue before, like, when you hang up the stuff on the back wall, have your webcam on, so as you're hanging it, you
Oh,
can kinda look and
keep
see.
it in frame, yeah.
Yeah, because I did that once where I had a setup before, and then where my webcam was, nothing would be seen, and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that the 3D printer isn't in frame because obviously, that's a big part of the content that we create here,
That
but
would be cool if it was working in the background while you're
oh,
streaming.
yeah, absolutely. And the shell of it is covered in stickers too, so,
Oh, that's
obviously
cool.
gotta represent everybody. Speaking of stickers that we gotta represent, let's take a look here. Ba-ba-bum. So, again, in the spirit of change, like I
Yeah.
said, we've got our buddy Zeonic Shadow in the chat, shared with us this earlier, which is the new 2025 Zeeg New York logo. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, totally. I love, the style that comes out of Zeeg New York stuff. On
Yeah,
point.
it's a badge, and, if you remember the previous Zeeg New York logo, was the traditional Principality of Xeon crest. This one's got the Neo Xeon crest, which kind of
Mhm.
leans into that, change that we were talking about. I
Oh,
mean, it
yeah.
really just looks like it looks like a badge. It honestly, you know what I think would be the most awesome merch idea, and I hope that you steal this idea, is if we made, like, soccer kits of our logos, because this would be a perfect badge, like, on the chest of, like, a soccer shirt.
Okay, I
Um
was about that soccer kit. Is that
oh, yeah, sorry, that's the old football slang is kit. As opposed to saying jersey, which is, typically
Oh,
like
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, so you're s okay, yeah, because that would be cool, just like what we see those patches, like, Al gets,
Yeah.
double that and then make one where it's like our logos or something but, like, with some sort of real life Federation/Xeon flair. I don't know what that would be exactly, but,
Yeah, we'll come up with something for sure because I think that would be, like I said, that's a cool merch idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen, like, some music artists, I think, like, Griffin did baseball jerseys, one year, and I know that, like, people do, like, obviously, like, American football jerseys and stuff like that. I would totally rock a Zeke New York soccer jersey
Oh,
or
yeah.
a Gundam Explained soccer jersey.
Yeah.
Um,
Of course, Midnight Hatter.
yeah,
It's like
I
you don't
mean,
say your own.
yeah,
You're the
it's
graphic
kinda like
designer.
voting for yourself, you're not supposed to do it.
Oh, it's one of those things you don't wear. Yeah, if you go see a band, you don't wear the T-shirt of the band you're seeing. Isn't
Right,
that
you have to wear some other obscure band so that everyone kinda knows that you're hip.
yeah. No, that's pretty good. But, yeah, they gave me another idea, and I think it passed. It had to do with the badge and all that stuff, and then I forgot, so I guess we can move on. But good
It
idea. Good idea.
hey, like I said, it's in the spirit of, of, you know, growing and changing, which again, it's one of those things, it's always serendipitous when these, types of things come up because obviously, you do your weekday morning streams over on Blue Gamer, and
Yeah,
this morning you brought up a topic which, is something that we talk about a lot on the channel is the idea of fatherhood and where to fit in the time for your hobbies, because you were talking about, when there was an Indiana Jones game that came out around the time that your daughter was born.
yeah,
That was what,
2009.
2009?
Yeah.
Yeah, you better know that
Yeah.
like, I don't know the year that my daughter was born, but I know that an Indiana Jones game.
Game came out. Uh, mm,
We take what we can get. But yeah, so and you spoke on how you even at that time, you were like, "I'm not gonna have enough time to, like, finish this game." And that was something that I experienced when my daughter was born. I was like, "Man, I'm not going to have the kind of time that I'm used to when it comes to working on Gundam projects." But over time, I came to appreciate and evolve how I utilized my time. And I think
yeah,
the thing that you brought up too was the idea of discretion, where it's like you now have the ability to say no to things that you either won't be able to finish or that you won't have like the desire to finish, which I think that those are two different things, right?
right. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you really just wanna get a new experience, because I think at the end of the day, it's the stimuli of the experience, and you might how much of that is now just when you're using your time, are you just doing a task for your time? Like a mobile game? You know how it's like at certain times, like you yeah, less of a task and more of make this experience what I want it to be at that moment, you know?
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned that about GBO too, where it's
Oh,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
that's not a game that
They just pick up a play just on a whim sitting on the couch.
yeah, yeah,
Generally,
yeah, generally speaking, no. It's like you'll log in, maybe do your free polls, try and do your dailies if you're on console. If you're on
yeah,
Steam, good luck. Like,
yeah,
the matchmaking takes so long. I think, when I first started using the Lola PC app, just because I wanted to try,
mhm.
GBO2 on
Oh, that's
PC,
right.
I was only able to get into 1 matchmaking, session, and that was in my video. I was like,
You were just testing something else completely, and
yeah.
we were able to see the outcome of trying to join a GBO2 match.
Right. So I ended up just playing, some of the boss matches instead and doing
Oh,
like
yeah.
the Dom rush that was in the solo player mode, which is why I think GBO2 needs like a more consistent solo player mode. Yeah, just take
Exactly.
some of those levels from Code
All of
Fairy and
yeah, no, even all the because what is it? I forget how often that they release, yeah, 3 new maps that are, PvE missions, and they
yeah,
just need to make it where that whole there's a whole list there that you can just go and join anytime, with friends.
exactly. Because that seems to be like what people want. I mean,
Yeah,
if we talk about what Gundam gamers are always clamoring for, aside from like open world RPG, which interestingly enough, I asked like Chat GPT what what kind of Gundam game should be made just on a whim, and it
yeah.
was like, "Ooh, open world RPG," and it was like, "Okay, clearly
I
you've
watch
been on Reddit."
too many of my videos are in its large language model.
Yeah, it keeps scraping all of our data.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, these days, I don't really see anybody complaining about the gameplay of GBO2. Most people complain about, the matchmaking or just that it's PvP.
And because of the PvP, there's that barrier to entry that then there's probably a large population that, it would be neat if it was PvE, but you could still do dailies and pulls to use that stuff in the PvE. I mean, it's really not much different. I think that'd be I tell you, it is interesting, and I don't think publishers and developers take this seriously, but there is a difference between people that when they play video games, if they play multiplayer or if they play single player, there's obviously that gradient in the middle. But
Yeah.
there are people that just play multiplayer because they're just a competitive person. They just go on and play multiplayer. Or there's some people that socially play multiplayer. And then there's some people that really just sit to spend alone time and play single player games.
Yeah.
Again, there's some crossover, but that's why I feel like if you have a game that's of like a property that's pretty big and it has the functionality, try to make it please both audiences.
I think the perfect example of that has been in mobile games. In particular, there's 2 mobile games that I can think of is, like,
Mhm.
Gundam Breaker Mobile, and then there was a Transformers game that I played way back in the day. I probably mentioned it before,
Yeah.
Transformers Legends, which was like a card game essentially,
Yeah.
and what was interesting about it is that the gameplay itself was PvE, but there was a competitive aspect when it came to chase, transformers to get, right?
Mhm.
So that when they would have an event, there would be a limited number of people that could get, I think it was like the top 5 ranked players would get Starscream's Ghost, like as a transformer,
Oh, wow.
if they played that event. And so it allows players to be competitive because they're competing with one another in order to get that chase variant, but they're not directly competing with one another in terms of, like, the actual gameplay.
Yeah, no,
Now
that's interesting, leaderboard stuff. You don't see that too
yeah,
often.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I mean, I think that leaderboard prizes and, like, leaderboard DLC is an awesome way to reward competitive players while still indulging the players that, us filthy casuals that can't
yeah, they
can't
don't wanna
keep
go
up.
online. And there's a lot of reasons, just from social anxiety or just from the technical aspect of playing a video game. Someone probably doesn't want a layer of, an interaction with another person. I wanna just think
Yeah.
about the controls and what I'm doing. But and
Yeah,
I think Grand Theft Auto is probably a good example of that whole thing. It has just Grand Theft Auto, the single player game and the GTA Online, which that game has made so much money from both.
yeah,
So and they incorporate both. Um, so yeah, that's it. Yeah. I think any game, any Gundam game that comes out in the future needs strong multiplayer, strong single player. It kind of loops back to this kind of respecting our time because again, with
yeah.
GBO2, not going to get. Sometimes I'm not going to get in a match. Even if I do, it might be where I have to then sit up and I have to be very focused because it's GBO2.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
And, like, hey, I don't wanna come off as, like, a games journalist where I'm complaining, like, "These games are too hard," and, like,
uh,
"Us dads don't have the time to get good." No, I think that it's about reaching and captivating an audience, and when you're leaving an entire segment of your audience on the table because you're not willing to make concessions around the gameplay, or at least, give options to players that don't have that time available to commit, I think that that's probably a misstep.
yeah. That
But
remind it's funny, it reminds me this again, 2009, Demon Souls had just came
oh
out.
yeah,
Or maybe it was 10 or 11, but it was my daughter super young. Yeah, I would think it was 9. And I just remember that game didn't have a pause button. And I remember hearing in
yeah,
reviews or people talking about it like, "Oh, those with kids are gonna have a hard time." I'm like, "Nah, it's not a big deal." And then I was like, "Yeah, yeah, not playing." And then
yeah,
I didn't play Demon Souls until like 2015 maybe. I had played Dark Souls after yeah, I wasn't able to get into the Souls games until later when the kids were older.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's and sometimes you have to, like, I guess, transform your hobbies, right? So, like, to your point, obviously, you didn't get to enjoy Souls games until later, but there were other games that you were playing, and you were still creating content. Like, you know, I
Oh,
I encourage people to go back and see, like, what some of the Blue Gamer videos did on YouTube. It was, like, crazy amounts of views, like, I think 22,000 views on a
oh,
couple of videos and stuff like that. It was, so it was impressive what you were doing at the time.
I
But,
know.
yeah,
Yeah,
as Nintendo Gal here says in chat, your hobby if your hobbies are important enough to you, you will find the time, which
yes.
ironically is something that a buddy of mine said when it comes to, like, D&D, is he was like, because he had 2 very young, daughters. His daughters are still actually pretty young, and he was the one that was always showing up for D&D on time, and he was like, "No, no, I'm gonna be here for 4 hours, and we're gonna play for 4 hours, like, this is time that I've blocked off that, these are agreements that I've made, and I've made that, commitment." And so for you guys that, either don't have full-time jobs or don't have kids, like, you have no excuse to not show up and roll
Oh,
dice, like
I tell you, if oh man, people always say this, but if I knew what I knew now then, in my 20s, I would time management be number 1. I would get so much done now that I know how to manage my time, but at the same time, I don't know how much having kids has helped me, learn about that, but
I
also
think so.
helped me get on a good sleep schedule. 'Cause I
That
love
too.
I love that I wake up early, and then I get up and I'm good, like, I feel like it's the first time in my life, it's like I just get I'm so used to it now, I just get up early,
Yeah,
get the kids ready.
underrated.
Yeah,
Waking up early is underrated for sure.
yeah,
But and then the other thing, like I said, I love I'm gonna keep reiterating it, is that as a result of my daughter being born and me not having time to get good at the parts of Gunpla that I was trying to work on, it forced me to do things that were not, I don't wanna say involve less time, but, that I could maximize my time. So, instead of spending time cleaning out airbrushes and making sure that I had, like, the perfect spray conditions in order to paint, it's like, "Oh, I
yeah.
can take a break from modeling something in Blender anytime I want, and then once it's on the printer, it's gonna be on the printer for 3, 4 hours, so I don't have to touch it for a while." If I'm working on, a piece of electronics, I can pick up and leave it. I don't have to worry about, like, paint is not gonna get crusted on my on my LED setup. So it forced me to get into sections of the hobby that I think are kind of fun and interesting, and, like, not a lot of people are doing it, at least in the English speaking, Gunpla world. I think, like, Pencil Knights is the best example of somebody who's really leaned into, LEDs and using microcontrollers and stuff. So
Yeah,
so
because I
that's
think,
definitely
I feel like it almost seems like there's this aspect, especially maybe in the West with building Gunpla, that it's really about the build, seam lines, nub marks, paint, diorama,
yeah.
you know? Where that's fine, that's awesome,
Oh, yeah.
but, like, in Japan, yeah, you see so many or I don't know if it's just Japan, but another pla I see so many more interesting things happening, with, gears and, LEDs, like you said. Even people printing that dude that has that white base that he printed,
Oh,
at
yeah.
scale.
Is it Colony Manufacturing?
Yeah, yeah. It's just crazy, like, yeah, sometimes when I see and I guess that just goes back to Gunpla and how you use your time because there's so many different ways that you could utilize the time to build Gunpla. Do you like to spend time on the cleaning or spend time on the painting or spend time on the LEDs? And, over time, those things change, and then
It's true.
something new a new ability in your hobby will form. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like an RPG. You've got different skill trees that you can expand
Yeah.
into, and
Yeah, which it's crazy. Video game talk again. Street Fighter 6, the single player mode, has single player mode,
yeah.
um, has a skill tree for a fighting game, which is pretty interesting.
Well, that's kinda like, didn't Mortal Kombat which Mortal Kombat was it? Annihilation? Uh,
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I
something like
remember
that.
they had that whole unlock system that was nuts,
Right.
where you
It's
played
like
that
you
single
played as
player.
Shujinko,
What's that?
and there was a Mortal Kombat game, I forget, I'm sure someone will catch it in chat, but there was a Mortal
Deception,
Kombat game you
Annihilation.
play as Shujinko, and you don't get to play
Oh.
as, like, any of the regular characters, at least not in the single player mode,
Oh.
and, like, you actually end up, oh,
Deception,
yeah,
okay.
Here you go. Ultronus always coming in clutch when it comes to the MK trivia. Yeah, one of the things that I thought was lame was that Shujinko, like, as you play through the game, you actually get older, and so you start off as, like, a young guy, and then by the end of the game, you're, like, this old wise master, but then you can't, like, go back and play as young Shujinko again, like, you're stuck with just old Shujinko. But yeah, he would learn, like, other people's moves and stuff like that, and like you said, it's like a skill tree, and,
But you know what, that
um
reminded me because that was then ahead of what Street Fighter 6 was doing. And, Tekken 8 now has implemented that sort of thing, but that was, yeah, that's pretty neat. Was that also the one where you could meet, like, Scorpion if you were at a certain place in the world at a certain time? Like,
yeah.
then he would show up or something, so then you can unlock him, or I don't know. I just remember that it was a crazy world to explore, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool, like, just that take on it, which I think you're seeing a lot of different, game genres do that kind of blend and, take the RPG elements, which
Mm,
God, I even hate saying the phrase RPG elements because, um it's become so just so overwrought. I mean, even sports games have RPG elements, right? Like the last FIFA that I played, again, going back to soccer, like I'm obviously a big soccer fan. I stopped playing after I think it was like FIFA 19, and that was when they started introducing like the journey mode where it was like you would play as this character and it's like a story where it's like, oh, you get picked up by your favorite English football club and then you get to go play for them, and if you work your way hard enough and you train real hard in all the mini games, you can level up your dribbling and your shooting skills, and then maybe you get to go on and play for Real Madrid.
it's
But
pretty
it
good.
was I do what I can. But yeah, it's like the idea of cramming RPG elements into a sports game is just kind of silly, right?
Well, what? It's interesting because, and I don't know how to equate this, but I almost feel like RPG elements are more of just baseline information that, as a society, as we've evolved, we require this stuff
Mm,
in anything, not just video games. So I think as a society, when we're going to play video games, we need a little more control, or being able to see bits of progress in order to feel like it's enough of a game. I don't know how else to. It's like how a car is nowadays versus, like, let's say you got to go buy a brand new car. You could buy a brand new 1920s car or a brand new 2025 car. They're going to be
yeah.
completely different. The expectations are completely different. And
Well,
yeah.
and stats become a huge thing, right? Like, remember, when did they stop talking about like 0 to 60 speed when it comes to advertising cars?
Oh yeah.
You notice
Yeah.
how that's not a thing anymore? It's like,
Yeah.
no, we care about miles per gallon. That's the
Yeah.
metric.
That's
That's the stat that we want to
that's a good
track.
point.
Um,
That's a good
but
point.
we've become such an analytical people that we love having a spreadsheet of
Yeah.
stats where it's like, ooh, which shoot, even like collecting cards in the 90s, I would love like looking at the back of cards and it's like, oh, Carnage has an 8 strength but like a 2 intelligence, and like, we
Yeah. It's
love
like,
being
really,
able
what does
to
that mean?
right.
Well,
We love being able to quantify different abilities, which, hey man, and again, you basically have to change or die, right? Like every art form has to evolve with the
yeah.
times and evolve with the people that are consuming it. And I think that that's
Right.
why you're seeing this drive for more stats and different things and being able to level up your stats and having much more control, like you said, of what abilities you're able to kind of rank in, which is why I think that we need an RTS that has that,
Yes.
because being able to, like, level up RTS units instead of just leveling up your base, like, you level up the individual units.
Yeah, especially if in this I just have in my mind, if we have the Earth sphere map, right? It's a tactical map. You can be on Earth, Moon, a colony, wherever. And I like the idea that you can have bases and then you go to that and maybe there's a conflict and you zoom in and you're fighting. I like the idea that then, let's say that you have, like, I don't know, like 5 badass ground GMs that have high veterancy. You want to keep them, and then you can put them in a drop ship or a carrier and, like, take them to another place to battle with. So even though you're building units, It's like you can maybe hold on to and carry these units that you've had in different places and, yeah, level them up as they go, and, yeah, there's so much there that Bandai could do with strategy in general, I think, with Gundam, because just the SD generation games, they gotta do more than that, but
Yeah.
the it I mean, it could just be a tactics game. Like, there's so many different ways that they could like, when I was playing the Metal Gear or no, not Metal Gear, Metal Slug, sorry, I know I got you excited. Metal Slug, it Tactics that just came out recently. When I was playing, I was like, "Wow, this is a very different feeling tactical game," and it made me think, yeah, Bandai could sit there and like they are doing with the rules of a card game or rules of a miniatures game, come up with a system for a tactical video game. That because the SD games are kind of, the same thing they've been forever.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, they already do have, certain amounts of, like, synergy bonuses, right? Like, if you have certain teams that are built with a certain composition, like, you'll get various
Oh,
buffs and
yeah.
debuffs and things like that. I think like for instance in G Generation Genesis, if you have multiple members of like the Midnight Fenrir Corps with each other, they actually will heal each other when they're adjacent to each other. Things like that are always awesome to incorporate into games. And one of the things that I think is kind of fun is you mentioned Metal Gear, but in like Metal Gear Solid 5 and to some extent in Peace Walker, when you're building up your mother base squad, there is actually like personality components to a certain extent. So like obviously every one of your recruits has certain stats like, oh, they're an A in this, they're a C in that, they have S in combat, what have you. So you assign them to different teams. But then there are also like uh there are attributes that each of them might have. So it's like, oh, this one's like a demolitions expert. Okay, this one's like a leader. So they will like raise the rank of everyone on the team. So it will also boost the overall composition of the team. And then you have troublemaker, which is an interesting one because they might have like insane stats. They might be like S's across the board, but by having them on a team, it increases the likelihood of injuries and,
Oh,
deaths on that team.
wow.
So I think that that's such a cool thing to have, like, an X factor, like,
Yeah. Wild
eh
card.
yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta have a wild card.
Yeah,
Why
that's
would anyone want a wild card on their
yeah. I tell you, I need to it's funny how much I've played Metal Gear Solid 5, and I still haven't ran into half the systems you've talked to me about. There's just
I
so
know.
much to that game.
Yeah, I think I've said it before is that like a lot of Metal Gear Solid games are good in spite of Hideo Kojima and not necessarily because of him,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because like I love the storytelling, but I think that a lot of people do get hung up on like, oh, I'm just so bogged down, like I don't want to have to listen to all these people talking for 45 minutes just so that I can ride a horse for another
Yeah.
45 minutes, like.
And do you know if he happens to have any, like, creative developers or technical people that he's always kept with him since, Metal Gear Solid maybe, that's always just kind of helped?
you
'Cause he
know
never mentions any sort of group of people or, you
No,
know
and I think you would probably find more people that he's had falling outs with than people that have
Yeah.
hung with him for the majority of his career, which is
'Cause
kind of unfortunate, but
it's just one of those things where when it comes to game development, there's a vision of a creator,
mhm,
but then there also needs to be, like, a good creative developer type as well. Like, you know what I
e
mean? Like that because it needs to be someone that reins in that creative vision, you know?
exactly, yeah, because you have the auteur, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with, like, George Lucas. We talked about this where it's like, yeah, George Lucas, brilliant storyteller, but definitely the team that was around him in the original trilogy gave him a lot more focus and a lot more,
Yeah, well, going through the standards of certain, like, movie filmmaking etiquette of, like, "Let's do this, let's do that." Not
right.
that what he was gonna do is wrong, it's just as an independent, he can really do whatever, which he kinda did with the prequels, and then I
Yep.
saw that movie Red Tails, which
Right.
it's interesting because it looks like an expensive B indie movie. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just that's just George Lucas's style,
Mhm. It is.
which that kinda reminds me too of, oh, who was I thinking about? Because George Lucas, Hideo Kojima, there was another creator I was thinking about that did something different. Um,
Tomino?
no, well, it's funny because we see that, oh, what is it? Hajime Yatate, which is supposed to be
Oh, yeah.
just the name of a collaboration of creators.
Right.
So that's almost kinda that same, thing you've got going on there, because Yoshiyuki Tomino is kind of the visionary behind kind of the foundation of the idea, and they have these creators that all work together to make the vision, happen.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that the true gift of a visionary, because anybody can have an idea, and the quality of those ideas is not measured on the actual substance of them. The quality of your idea is measured in your ability to articulate it to other people in order to get them to buy into your vision. Um, and
Yeah.
that's where I think people like Kojima, Tomino, George Lucas, uh, I mean, even like Christopher Nolan. These are, and
Yeah.
I hate Christopher Nolan. You know this.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm right
But
there with you because it's his brother and, someone else that helps him out,
see, there
with
you go.
with it.
There's always somebody in there that's willing to put in the legwork for these, auteurs, these visionaries that are just able to express their vision in a very compelling way.
And I wonder if that's what Bandai's really good at doing then, because I feel like they're really Bandai when it comes to Gundam they're really good at doing something different to where, yeah, people get mad, online when, something new gets out, but also respect the source material of whatever AU or UC that they're using, but they're able to make sure that they're utilizing the talent correctly. You know,
Mhm.
like, the tone of Hathaway, I think, is incredible for a modern Universal Century story. That that was a very specific vision to craft, and the fact that they
And
did
that would
that, I think
actually
is great.
work in live action. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Yeah. That's what's, very interesting about it. But then I'd also look at another part of UC, and that is, Cuckoo's Doan's Island, which
mhm.
takes that more of the es the foundation of what Gundam is, the super robot, the, painter, I forgot his name, Yasuhiko.
Oh, Yasuhiko, Yoshikazu Yasuhiko.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Taking kind of his style, it's almost like where if Gundam splintered,
Yeah.
and so then but what Cuckoo's Doan's Island appears to be to me is a high quality, and I'm only saying this because they used to be like this high quality Disney animated film.
Mm. Yeah.
So to me, Cuckoo's Doan's Island is that. So it's interesting how Bandai knows based on what the story is being told, what creator or creators to have behind it to make sure it makes sense. And it's crazy how much it works out. Um,
Yeah. I mean, obviously, time will tell, how that works out with Anno, right? And, and
well,
G-Quax.
you know what? Yes, but I think because it's alternate UC, yeah,
It
I'm
gets a
I'm fine with it
pass.
being as goofy as it wants to be. And that is a good point because what I was just talking about is how serious UC takes itself. This is actually an advantage or a time for it to explore kind of more of the artistic side of things. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it does take it in a different direction, not only in terms like not only quite literally in terms of the events of what happens, but artistically and and I assume in terms of its like tone and theme, which I think that's probably more what I'm interested in seeing than the designs because I think it's easy to differentiate yourself with just the look of something, right? Like if something is brightly colored and has kind of cartoonish appeal, something like a Ghibli film, like it's very easy to
mm,
say like, okay, I want to make it dark and gritty, and then it's going to be visually distinct from the original. But what really makes things, interesting is when you start playing with the themes that are involved, right? And I don't know, I mean, that's gonna be something interesting for sure. My brother was actually teasing me earlier today because I was like, "Hey, obviously there was some new announcements with the, Gundam live action movie,"
Oh.
and he was like, "Yeah, I can't wait to, hear you complain about it."
Oh.
And I was like, "Well, I mean, I've already everything that I have to complain about it, I've already complained about it with." It's like, um, I think you
The
and I probably disagree about, Jim Mickle, and then, of course, like I said, not a fan of Christopher Nolan, so the fact that Legendary is attached to it, I'm like, "Eh."
well, so with, Jim Mickle, that's the thing, like, I I feel like you know more about you have more context of what so that's the thing, I have no idea, with the Jim Mickle, like, maybe it could be bad, but what I've seen, it looks good, but yeah, again, it seems like you have more background information on that, and then the, what was the other
Oh,
thing?
Legendary?
Yeah, Legendary, that's right,
Mm,
thanks. That's interesting, Christopher Nolan, but I almost feel
that
like
is
Chris
his that is, like, his production company, right?
well,
Or at least it was they produced his first movies before
it
Syncope,
might have
right?
been it's because I'm trying to remember what it was where I saw that he was a producer on. It was something else WB, and it's like, obviously, he had no creative input on this. He's just put on as a producer because it looks good and he gets paid, you know?
Yeah.
And I wonder with Gundam, is there going to be behind the scenes live action Gundam, is there gonna be someone that feels like they have to own this? With it things like that happen, but, you know, um,
Yeah, it's tough to say because, and it's one of those kinda sad things about Tomino is that, he kind of has washed his hands of being involved with Gundam, to a certain extent. Like, he shows up for premieres and he,
yeah.
will give, interviews and things like that, but he doesn't want any direct control over anything anymore. Um Whereas, going back to the example of, say, like, the Mario Brothers movie, it's like Shigeru Miyamoto was kind of, like, on top of them and saying, like, "This is what I envision for it. This is what I wanna see," and
Isn't it
so
kinda crazy how the first movie turned out then? Is it maybe something where the being seen in Hollywood is a bigger deal than what the output was, and so to get some sort of contract to get some sort of Hollywood film made, they would just have to have creative control, and Nintendo was like, "Well, if this is a way to get her name," kinda like what happened with Godzilla in '98.
exactly.
Eh
Well, I
yeah.
I think that the '90s, they were trying to break into the American audience and with a lot of their big properties, right? I mean, that's why Gundam Wing came to the United States
Oh, yeah.
before, 0079. Then, like you said, Godzilla and Mario, and then there was, like, the Mario cartoons, like, which I
Oh,
think
yeah.
ironically, wasn't the Mario Brothers cartoon called, like, Super Mario Brothers 3: The Cartoon, which was
That
kinda
was one of the cartoons. There was multiple. They even had Mario World. They had the original Mario Brothers. It was interesting. It had all the different man, I remember watching those.
Yeah, did I just unlock some core memories?
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is maybe they just didn't know what to expect at the time, and it was just like, "Hey, we're gonna agree to these partnerships," and then once it was like, "Ooh, you know, 50 times burnt, 50 times shy, we're not going to trust, Americans with our properties anymore because, very few of them, like, panned out," right?
Well, and it's interesting because even as a kid, you know, I I always thought Transformers was a little goofy. And then when I
It is
learned
pretty
that
goofy.
it's like a Japanese just toy and then the Americans made up a story, I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense. This sounds like a
Checks
story an
out.
American would make up or, a Western." But I think I don't know why, but I really do feel like in the '80s and '90s, there's this sort of bad, I don't know, storytelling that would happen with, like, another property or something,
Yeah,
and it's weird how that happens because it's like, is it more because that comes from the business end? The only reason a transaction is being made for a production in a different country is to make money. So they're just talking to business people. It's not
right.
like it's a creative that's like, "Well, I have a vision for how we bring your property over."
Yeah, and what's great about the time that we're living in now is that there are so many genuine fans that do have the ability to, articulate a
Yeah.
vision that they want for the franchise to go in. Whereas, to your point, before, it's kind of the inverse of, like, what's happened in the tech world, where it does seem like a lot of the CEOs of video game companies now are not video game developers themselves. They are like foreign, not foreign as in like out of country, but foreign to
Industry,
the
yeah,
industry.
business
They're
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just seasoned businessmen, and so they're making seasoned business decisions, but they're not necessarily making decisions that are, in the best interest of the vision of the company.
Right, like making the decisions like, "Well, as a business owner, I would do this if this happened," but they're never thinking short term of like, or I guess it's long term, but in the short term, thinking, okay, long term, what is going on in the space? And that's
Mhm.
what you got to feel. And sometimes you got to change things. Yeah, even EA announced, just recently, how they had losses. They're going to change how they're doing the FC Sports because they're losing players. Not that they're
Yeah.
losing, but they're not gaining. There's no momentum in the FC Sports title.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the criticism, and again, this is the reason that we talk about these things is because we care about Gundam so much, because we care about these shows and this franchise. It's like, we don't want them to go the way of some of these things that have gone away
Right.
as a result of these types of decisions, and so, like, with something like Gundam Breaker 4, where you're not you're not expanding, in fact, you're, like, contracting the target audience. You have to wonder, like, what's the long-term play here?
Yeah.
Um, because I don't as cool as it is that we're getting, the Gundam EX and the G-Quacks
Oh,
in Gundam Breaker, it's like, is that gonna cause a new insurge of new players, or is it just gonna retain the existing ones to come back and play a little bit more?
yeah, no, that's an excellent question, dude. Like, that's exactly a question I would ask
Yeah.
if you and me were brought
If
into a
we were at that
Q&A.
boardroom.
Yeah, and it's like, "This is the game, what's," and then at the end, it'd be like, "Okay, well, what's the long-term play here?" Or, what? Yeah.
And to be honest with you, this is a perfect comparison, is like, when I look at something like the Super Mario Brothers movie compared to the Barbie movie, which, like, I recently, watched that with my wife and thought it was hilarious. Like, it's such a fun, kind of like play on the franchise of Barbie. But what really makes me sad about it, and I think I've expressed this before, is that, like, it doesn't give it doesn't give little girls anything to be excited about. Like, my daughter, obviously, she's a little too young to enjoy it anyway, but, like, she's not going to watch the Barbie movie and then be interested in Barbie products. She's not gonna
Right.
go buy the dolls. It's more of, like, a nostalgia thing for people, like, our age that are not collecting toys anyway. Whereas the Super Mario Brothers movie, it's cartoonish, it's silly, it's fun, and, like, my daughter loves it. She was just watching it, like, an hour ago before she went to bed.
Nice.
So it's like that makes her want to play the game more and buy more toys and, like, be involved in that franchise. And so when it comes to creating content and creating products around these franchises that we love, one of the, like you said, what's the end goal? Is the end goal to create something that's like a nostalgia bait that's going to, oh, we can laugh at ourselves because, oh, isn't it so silly that we used to collect dolls
Yeah.
when we were little? Or is it something that's like, that's going to reinvigorate the next generation of kids that play with that thing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, they shoulda just had Gundam Breaker Mobile continue, and then
Yep.
just make it where there's kits you could buy and then scan something with your phone to get some kits in the game. I mean, that's easiest play right there. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, taking on the amiibo aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Toys to Life. Yeah.
um, which I think most people were buying amiibos just because of the Breath of the Wild bonuses. Like,
Oh, yeah.
of every game that had amiibo perks, like, Breath of the Wild was the best one because it
It
was like
was.
you could every day you could come in here and, like, re-up on all of your gear and everything. To the
Eh
point that, like, you have people on eBay that are selling, like, pirated, NFC chips.
Oh, to get yeah, that's very interesting how it was a once a day thing in Breath of the Wild if you bought something outside the game. Like, Nintendo was figuring that out, it's like a roundabout way to do DLC. Um you know?
It is, yeah, and it keeps people logging in, kinda doing their dailies.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I mean, if that was the way to get people to buy more model kits, then absolutely do that, and it it also, it accomplishes the same thing that we're trying to do with, like, the Gundam Metaverse, right? Like, the uh, I always complain about, like, how ugly the textures and the animations are when it comes to, like, the scanned stuff from, the Metaverse. It's gotten a lot better, and especially on static models, it did really well. I was actually really impressed with the, is it the Torahachi that, Banagher piloted in the first episode of Unicorn when he saves Mineva?
I don't remember what that was called.
It was like a junior mobile, something like
Yeah.
that. But that was obviously I think it was like the 2011 or like 11th, GBWC winner, and that was one of the models that was in the metaverse, like, when you could walk around
Oh,
the
yeah.
museum. And I was really impressed with the way that they scanned it in, and you could actually see some depth, and they were able to kind of the textures were still a little bit muddy, but it doesn't have to move, which is an important distinction because once you start incorporating movement, and anybody who has ever taken a Gundam model and put it in Mixamo in order to download animations knows this is like when you're weight painting, animations on a 3D model, it's very easy to, like, get things messed up, like, I mean, if you took a Zaku and put it in Mixamo and then used their auto rigger, the chin of the Zaku is, like,
Would be on the
attached to the
chest.
chest, and it, like,
Oh.
stretches, and it looks goofy. So, the algorithms are not smart enough to render animations on 3D objects that are, what is it? Photogrammetry,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's 3D scanning.
yeah.
Objects that are 3D scanned, it's very hard to get them rigged correctly, and especially if you're like a scratch builder, things like that, so
Yeah, I tested on an app one time for my 3D printer where I was, like, taking pictures of something. It it didn't work. I bet it's better nowadays, but I tried it once.
Oh, Nintendo Gal in chat here says, "I think it's a different POV here than in Japan. GB4 doesn't need to bring in more in Japan. Gundam is already huge." And that's true.
Mhm.
That is a fair
Yeah.
point. Um, I always bring up, like, to me, it was just the fact that, um that the Gundam franchise over the last 10 years has grown by 80 is it
Yeah.
81% or 84%? But it almost doubled in size in the last 10 years, and yet, there were 150,000 less copies of and this is just in Japan, not in the United States. There were
Oh.
150,000 less copies of GB4 sold than GB3, despite
Mhm.
being on more platforms,
That's
because Gundam Breaker 4
yeah,
was on
that's interesting. Because yeah, Switch,
yeah,
PC,
Switch and
totally.
PC. So yeah, that was a bummer.
But it's interesting because even Nintendo was reporting how software and hardware sales were down, but that would make sense.
Mhm.
You would think Switch 2 is around the corner, but I wonder if that's more telling of the industry in general and not just Nintendo.
It is, yeah. I mean, and you talk about this daily when it comes to the video game industry, and like, I guess if I were working in video game marketing, I would say like, no, 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 we're not. The video game industry isn't shrinking. We're becoming more discretionary about our audience, and we're being more selective about our customer. That's what it is. Is we're
Yeah.
it's a tactical decision to lose customers. Um, but no, and to be honest with you, no industry can exist in a state of perpetual growth. It's just impossible, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people fell into that trap of assuming that, because of the growth that happened in particular industries during COVID, i.e., Gunpla and the industry that I work in, golf, both industries that saw like a huge uptick in participants because their social distance activities during COVID. Um, Now the market's kind of resetting back to its pre-COVID levels, and so all of these people that came into the business, because they were like, "Ooh, hey, look, there's all these people buying model kits." It's like, well, now all of those people buying model kits are going back to whatever they were doing before they were buying model kits.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it's interesting because that just shows like how these companies work, where it's not made to be like it's like every company is going to fail. If you're trying to make money, you're going to end up failing down because it's like you get too big for yourself, but then there's that expectation, especially if you've gone public, you have shareholders.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
Okay, yeah, when you have, people that have a stake in what you're doing, then all of a sudden you become beholden to what their interests are.
yeah.
But that's why I encourage people to study, game theory and not game design, but game theory.
Oh.
Simon Sinek does a great talk about the infinite game of business, which is like, you're not playing to win because playing to win means that there's an end to the game, but there's no end to the game of life. There's no end to the game of business. The objective of the game is to stay in the game as long as you can.
Mm.
So, as long as you can still open your doors tomorrow, you're still in business.
Okay, well, that's maybe some good, information to take
Yeah, there you go. Some reading material. I'm giving you guys homework. But yeah, what's tonight's theme? Like I said, change or die, right? And
Yeah,
so we've got some big changes coming this year. Like I said, Zeek New York's got a new logo. I've got a new setup. I've got some exciting things coming up the pipeline that I want to share with you guys. Special shout out to Nintendo Gal in chat because obviously, she and I have been working on some projects here that I can't wait to show you. And yeah, we got more news on the Gundam movie, which
no, amazing.
I think maybe by 2030 we might see some trailers.
Dude, it's
I'm
crazy.
kidding.
I can't wait. Trailer this year. By Christmas.
That would be the best Christmas present is a
Yeah,
Gundam live action trailer.
yeah, definitely.
But that's all for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your week. We will, of course, see you tomorrow on the Gundam Explain Show live. So be
Yep.
sure to tune in then and go check out Adam's video on the Gundam movie news down in the links below because obviously, if you haven't seen it yet, there was some new announcements
Oh,
that we
yeah,
didn't even talk about some of the stuff that was in there.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a
Yep.
good one.
See y'all.